Welcome to Your Empowered Birth, the channel where I help you get your power back from the medical system so you can feel confident advocating for yourself, asking for what you truly want, going for that dream home birth or that true natural birth experience, and you don't fall into what I call the natural birth traps. These are the things in our birth culture and medical system that undermine your confidence. I talk about that a lot inside of my book, Your Empowered Birth, which is behind me and also in my hands. The purpose of this video is really to read to you the chapter of Your Empowered Birth and help you to navigate that system. Because the truth is, why am I putting this out for free if you can go and get my book? Simple. I myself will listen to things. I will listen to a podcast. I'll borrow a book from the library and I'll be like, I love this book so much. I want a copy of it. So my gift to you is really to let you test out Your Empowered Birth, to get the whole thing, to have the system. And then if you feel called to purchase Your Empowered Birth, it's just available on Amazon. Proceeds from Your Empowered Birth go towards the Empowered Birth movement, putting food on the table for my kids as well. But really what I'm doing with this is I want to eliminate birth trauma. I want to eliminate that regret that we have with our birth experiences. We deserve to have that beautiful initiation into motherhood or reinitiation into motherhood, reclaiming our power in our bodies and in our birth experience. And birth is really a metaphor for life. How we come to our births is how we come to everything. So in the last few videos, I was talking about the 5-pillar system. I was talking about my story. If you've just come across this one and you're like, I have not heard the whole story yet, that's okay. You can always go pause this video, save it into a playlist for yourself to watch later and go and watch the rest of them. Or what you can do is you can watch this one now. And then if you want to go back, you can go and check those out. You can also go get my book, Your Empowered Birth. It is available on Amazon, as I said, and you can just follow my YouTube channel. Make sure you're liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel and pay this forward. Share this with another mom who could use this. This is all about getting the birth you want the first time. However, even if you've already had more than one baby and you're like, what went wrong? This chapter is also for you because it's going to help you to see, oh, this is what I fell into the trap with last time that I'm not going to fall into this time. The questions that I ask in each of the sections, the journal questions, they will also help you. Part of the Empowered Birth method is that you need to take action. So these are not videos that you watch passively. I mean, some of them on my channel, you can just watch and be like, that was really helpful. And now I can go deeper. And there's this thing that I can go and get, and it's free and it's awesome. And I'm getting more help and I'm getting my empowered birth. But some of the videos and some of my trainings, like my community knows, and the women who've worked with me, they know that when you take action towards your dreams, that's when things actually turn around. So if you don't have a notebook right now, that's okay. But save this video for later because you're going to want to come back to it. You're going to want to go through each of these sections and make notes. And you're going to want to basically be like, okay, this is the map that I need to follow. So I'm going to give you my system of how to plan and get your dream birth the first time to avoid birth trauma, to avoid that first C-section that you don't want, to avoid that induction that often gets pushed on a first-time mom, to avoid having your care provider trick you into a highly medicalized version of birth where you're like, you know, that was painful and traumatic and I don't want to go through that again. Because the truth is that some moms who are first-time moms and they go through and they get really traumatized and they end up with a C-section and induction, it adds more fear. And then they're like, I don't want to try again. This is what happened to Jenny. After I found her way back in 2020 in the fall, she had said, I want to learn from you, but I don't want to have another baby because what happened to me was so traumatic and I'm high risk and there's just no way that I'll be able to have a natural birth. Spoiler alert, she did. In 2022, just before this book was written out and I had the manuscript and I just need one more chapter left, she had her baby. And it was completely unassisted vaginal birth after cesarean in the hospital. So anyone who says you can't do it because you're high risk, just remember Jenny's story, and I'll share more about that later. And I do share that in other trainings as well. You can check them out. You can go to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/masterclasses to see some of my other videos that I have saved. Or you can go and get my book, Your Empowered Birth. It is on Amazon, okay? So I'm going to start today with chapter 6. And as I said, if you haven't watched the other videos, you can always go back into the playlist. It's called Your Empowered Birth Book, and you can go and binge watch the whole thing. All right, so let's get started. Chapter 6, How to Get the Birth You Want the First Time. First of all, congratulations for making it this far. Many people have picked up books and never even cracked the spine, or they read the introduction and then do not read any further. Because you have already come this far, I want you to acknowledge yourself because you are committing to get the birth you know you truly deserve. Up until this point, my intention has been to show you how birth can go wrong when you give your power away. And I've shown you a glimpse of what your future can become. We're going to go deeper into the 5 pillars of empowered birth now. So if you need a quick refresher, then grab the quick guide at empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras so you can refer back as needed. First of all, I need to tell you that if this is your first pregnancy, you have infinite possibilities and few to no limitations in what you can create for your birth. True, you do not have a proven pelvis, as doctors like to say, and you don't know what to expect in terms of the pain in labor. But you don't actually need to have any proof at all that you can do this. The reality is that if you were stranded in the middle of nowhere, you could birth your baby. I'll share one little story with you, though. A friend of mine, Kylie, who you might know as the autonomy mommy, came to her pregnancy equally as terrified as I had been. In fact, she also had thought that she would just want a cesarean. But then she discovered that natural birth could be powerful and painless, and so she worked on her mindset and practiced techniques that would help her open and relax. 5 minutes after she gave birth for the first time, she said, "That wasn't as hard as it looked." So what happened? Is she superhuman? No, she simply chose the right environment. You'll recall from the previous chapter that birthing in an environment that doesn't support physiological birth can lead to you having to fight for any sense of autonomy. So while I had to struggle and birth my baby in spite of the hospital environment, Kylie never experienced that frustration. She got the home birth I wish I'd been brave enough to claim for myself. This is only a small example of how certain choices in your pregnancy will influence the kind of birth you get. But you're probably wondering what you need to do first, so I'm going to lay it out for you as simply as I can. At the end of each small section of this chapter, you will be given a journal exercise. I encourage you to grab a coil notebook and a pen and write down your insights and ideas as you read this chapter. Also, consider checking out the additional resources at the back of this book. The order we are going to do these exercises in is also important, so please do not skip any sections. Follow the process. Much like labor, you cannot rush it or change it. It is designed a certain way for a reason. I promise that by the end of the book, it will make sense, though. So, how is it all going to work? First, we're going to focus on the most powerful components, and then we'll tackle the more practical and logical aspects. I'll also explain why you're doing these exercises so that you can see how they all tie together. Let's get started. All right. So step 1 is releasing your fear. And the thing is that I've decided that instead of just reading out every single chapter in this book for you, I'm going to break this down. So I've actually decided to break down these videos, and the next one is still in chapter 6. However, it is not just chapter 6, but step 1 of chapter 6. All right. And if you want the whole thing, as I said, you can go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras. The whole list of the questions is on there. So you can go through and have your journal prompts to work with as you go through this material. And you can always go and support the Empowered Birth movement by getting a copy of your Empowered Birth. It is available on Amazon, wherever you have your Amazon account. If you're in the UK or international, it's only in English right now, currently in 2024. However, maybe it might get translated into other languages in the future. I speak English. I am completely fluent in English. I am not fluent in any other languages. So that is why the book is written in English. And if you do need some extra support, you can always reach out to me. hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com. All right. So I will see you in section 1. I can't wait to share this with you. Step 1, release your fears. Before you start writing your birth plan or hire anyone to support you in your birth, you need to know one thing. You are more likely to achieve the desired outcome you want if you have imagined yourself doing it first. If you start out saying, I want a natural birth, but you can't actually picture how that can happen and get clear on the feeling you will have when you do it, then you need to change that first. You see, if you want a natural birth, but feel that it's not already inevitable, then there's a hidden fear lurking deep in your subconscious, asking, but what if I can't do it? This is especially true if you come from a family background where no one has had a completely physiological birth at home. So you may say that this is what you want, but the internal story that is going on is actually doing everything to put fear and doubt in your head. This is why when you decide you want a natural birth, you go out and ask the mom groups what they recommend in terms of coping with the pain. And then in the same breath, you might also wonder if maybe you should get the epidural or consider it just in case. You'll go read a bunch of books, but then someone will say something about how they read the same one and still got a cesarean. And you'll wonder if the book isn't actually going to help you. You'll ask your doctor about natural birth, but then when they tell you their heavily medically controlled version of it, that sounds almost as scary as having a cesarean. So then you're freaking out because you don't know if you'll be able to progress at the rate they're telling you, or grow a baby under a certain size, or be able to go into labor by your due date to avoid an induction. Here's the secret. If you want a natural birth, you can get one. But you must actually believe that it's possible. What is standing in your way is not your body's ability to birth. It's fear. Society and our birth culture have done a really good job of scaring the crap out of you for as long as you have been alive and birth has been on your radar. It started the first time you saw birth on TV. Recently, I was watching Once Upon a Time with my 6-year-old daughter. Snow, Mary Margaret, was giving birth and she was screaming in pain on a bed. Fortunately, as a birth worker, I could rant and rail at the screen and remind my daughter that's not physiological birth. Unless you happen to be fortunate enough to have your mother tell you the same as you grew up, you probably watched scenes like that and were convinced that birth is always painful and traumatic, that you will be in stirrups with someone telling you to push, and you will be in so much pain and it will be unbearable. But that's the trickery of our media. And the entire goal is to sensationalize and dramatize everything. Birth is rarely calm and beautiful in TV and movies. In fact, the only scene that stands out as showing a powerful birthing moment is in Wanderlust, where Paul Rudd's character witnesses a free birth and is freaking out the whole time while the mother is riding the waves and practically having an orgasm as her baby emerges. It's played off for laughs, of course, and the intention is, look at this crazy hippie chick birthing in this totally unrealistic way that would never happen. But to anyone who has actually witnessed and experienced physiological birth, it's not as out there as the filmmakers would have you believe. So, if birth isn't always horrifically painful, then why does our society say it is? because there is a vested interest in keeping you afraid of your own power to birth. And it all goes back to the myth that Christianity created that Eve and all women after her were cursed to birth children in sorrow. I need to point out that whether you believe in the story or not, whether you are spiritual, religious, atheist, or agnostic, the reality is that story came from somewhere and someone else eventually interpreted and translated it. People take stories and create their own meanings to explain their own experiences or to even push an agenda. You can see this example simply by watching people argue over books, TV, even movies. They all have a different interpretation of the same scenes and character motivations, and they can get pretty heated. The truth is that the only one who knows the true intention and themes of the story or the character's motivations is the person who first created that story. The same will be true for your story. No matter what others say about it, your experience of your pregnancy and birth is the most accurate version of the events as they pertain to your thoughts and feelings about your experience. That means that only you get to decide what's okay and what's not, what's traumatic and what's not, what a good birth means to you versus what you would consider a bad birth, what's safe. You get what I'm saying. If you truly want to take control of your birth experience, it's going to start with the story you tell yourself. Your first exercise is going to be to examine all of those things that you're telling yourself about whether you can have the birth you really want, and start asking where it all came from. Whose story have you been running in your head? And what interpretation and meaning are you giving it? Can it be changed? Could the author of that story have intentionally left something out? Maybe they weren't even aware that they haven't included any context. Think about a time someone told you a story that didn't make sense. What was missing from it that might have made it easier to understand? Or think of something you were told that frightened you. One example is a very popular article that constantly gets reshared on social media by multiple parent news sites. It's called, "My Natural Birth Traumatized Me." That grabbed your attention, right? Well, the problem is that most people who comment on that article don't actually read it. They're simply triggered by those words in the headline, and they start pouring into the comments with all their opinions and truths about how natural birth is so overrated. But there's more beyond the surface. If you read that article, you'll see that the protagonist did not have a natural birth. She simply went unmedicated, had Pitocin, and endured the pain of an assisted vaginal delivery where they pulled the baby out with the vacuum or ventouse, and she tore badly. That's what the traumatic natural birth was. Many people are simply passing on these same story headlines over and over and not diving under the surface to read the article. Every time you hear a scary birth story or someone says something that upsets you, take a moment and think, is this the full article and all the context? Or is this just a clickbait headline? So now you understand why you might be freaking terrified of birth, but the question is, how do you get out of that fear? That's where your homework comes in. All right. So as I said, if you don't follow these instructions, you don't do the journal exercise, this is not going to help you. You're just going to be like, that was a really nice video. I learned a lot. I really enjoyed this. Or get the book and you're like, that was a really nice book. I love it. I learned a lot. But if you don't do the exercises, this is not going to work because you are immersed in that culture of fear. You're immersed in a society where the medical system basically controls birth. And you're not going to get that true natural birth experience unless you tackle your fears. So these journal questions are crucial to the empowered birth method. This is what I coached all of my clients on. This is the questions that I asked them. We went deep. They would talk to me. We would bounce ideas off of each other. They would express these questions and they would get clarity. Now, obviously, I'm not coaching you directly. You are just getting this book. You are just getting these action steps. You're watching this video. You need to do this yourself. It's self-study. Okay. If you do want to work with me directly, I do have a process. However, again, you need to have done these exercises first. Otherwise, it's just not going to work for you. It's just not going to work for you. One of my empowered birth ambassadors might ask you these questions and get some clarity for you if you really did want to work with me at that level. But otherwise, this is important. You need to follow these questions. If you want the full list, go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras and go and get it. Okay. So I'm going to ask the questions. You're going to follow along and it's up to you if you do the work or not. I can't force you, but as I said, this is the system that I used for myself. This is the system I use for all my clients. This works. This works better than I ever thought possible when I started coaching my clients and they had high risk labels. And it's like everybody in the medical system doubted that they could do it. And they've done it because they've been able to get out of their fear. So this is the first step. It's important. You need to ask these questions. So journal exercise 1.1. So here's what you need to do. Take out your notebook and a pen. And for the next few days, I want you to simply observe what stories you're absorbing about birth. Pay attention to ads, TV shows, movies, books, things that you overhear in conversations, social media, anywhere that anyone is talking about birth or birth is being shown. You can even dive deeper into things you've seen in the past. Think about those messages you received and ask yourself these questions. Number 1, what happened? Number 2, what thoughts come to mind immediately when you think about this? Number 3, what feelings come up for you? Are you scared, excited, sad, angry? What sensations in your body are you feeling when you think about this? Are you tense? Do you feel relaxed? Do you feel expanded? Do you feel contracted? What is that feeling and sensation? And number 5, what do you need to know in order to feel safe and believe that this won't happen to you? Are there similar stories where there was a happier outcome? So take as much time as you need when asking these questions. It is an ongoing process, and you will find as your pregnancy progresses that more people might try to dump their fears on you. Practicing this exercise multiple times now will allow you to do it much faster later, so that when someone does try to scare you at the end of your pregnancy, and they will, you won't be stuck in that fear. In fact, some of my clients have gone into incredibly stressful appointments with their doctors and been able to hold their ground simply by recognizing what is coming up for them and remembering that their doctor is operating out of their own fear. Now, as a first-time mom, you might be asking how you can challenge stories without any prior experience. After all, how can you really know that labor isn't as horrifically painful as people are telling you if you've never had firsthand experience? That's where the right education will help you immensely to sort out myth from reality. In fact, this is how I was able to do a complete 180 at the start of my first pregnancy and plan a home birth, despite the fact that I had no idea what labor would actually feel like. So get ready, because you're going to get my crash course in childbirth education. Step 2, unlearn what you were taught. I'm going to be super blunt right now and tell you that much of what your doctor will tell you about childbirth is bullshit. In fact, most medical professionals have never witnessed a true physiological birth and wouldn't know how to support one. That's why it's important that you learn what you need so that you can train them. I know It's radical, isn't it? Imagine teaching your doctor who went to medical school for years on how to support you in your birth. The audacity for you, a first-time mom, to think that you know better than they do. But here's the thing. You actually do know more than they do. You're the only one birthing this baby. The problem with maternity care is that it is based off of the idea that you somehow can't birth without their help. They will even go so far as to say, don't push until the doctor gets here. Now, think about this logically for a minute here. How do they know it's not time for you to push? If your body is actively signaling for you to do it, then doesn't that mean it's time? If you say the baby is coming and they brush you off and tell you that's impossible because they just checked you an hour ago and you were barely 4 centimeters dilated, then who is right? Well, typically what happens is that you end up birthing your baby and the nurses are shocked and freaking out because the doctor hasn't even arrived yet. This is how a mom can be sent home multiple times from the hospital, being told her contractions aren't strong enough yet, only to return a third time and give birth in the lobby. This is also how a mother can say something is wrong and the doctor dismisses her concerns, only to have a tragedy happen. The other side of this coin is when you instinctively know that nothing is wrong, but your doctor insists you need to induce or otherwise change your birth plans, only to find out that everything was actually fine and you just went through the pain of an induction and a cesarean for nothing. So how do you avoid this? It starts with recognizing that you cannot go with the flow, and you cannot take everything your doctor or anyone else with more experience than you tells you at face value. In fact, even if you're following me on social media channels, I don't want you to just take my word for anything either. Two people can get the exact same information and make entirely different choices. And part of the reason I cite so many different sources and bring in multiple perspectives into my teaching is because I want you to know where you can get more of that information. It's no secret that I love to learn. I am constantly reading and taking classes, and then I apply the tools I pick up and use them in my coaching as well as in my life. I also don't take anything at face value, though. Instead, I take whatever I'm learning and I dissect it, challenge it, look for other sources to back it up, apply it to multiple scenarios, and only then do I decide whether it's going to work for me or not. In fact, I didn't fully trust my own system I developed until I took it outside of my own experience and tested it multiple times with multiple women and applied it to their own unique challenges and situations. I also applied the system in other areas of my life to see if it would work outside of birth. Even then, I didn't fully trust it until after I started coaching my clients at a deeper level and walked them through the process. And I learned as much from them as they did from me. To develop any system and have it actually work are two different things. To simply read something in a book versus also taking the knowledge to apply in your own life are also two different things. You not only need to know what to think, but you also need to know how to think. The problem is that you might not have been taught how to learn things the right way, especially if you had a very traditional education. I'm going to share something with you. The original purpose of public education for all children was not to create intelligent beings, but instead, it was meant to serve the industrial age. The system wanted kids to be able to fit into the box. This is why, instead of questioning the context and psychological complexities of wars and other historical events, you memorized dates. It's why, as one of my high school teachers pointed out so eloquently, you aren't actually graded on what you think, but on whatever you can regurgitate about the lesson that the teacher told you. It's more, what do you think I want you to think, and far less think for yourself. Why does this matter in the context of birth? Because your care provider was also taught what to think. As soon as you go into your first appointment, you will notice that things are done as a matter of routine and no one questions it. If you ask your care provider why something is being done, their typical answer will be that it's standard of care. They might also tell you that they're trying to avoid a bad outcome or that a study was done. But that's as far as the conversation will go. This is why I spend a great deal of time discussing with my clients all the possible tests and exams that they could be offered, and we talk about how they feel about them. We talk about what certain results of those tests could mean and explore the possibilities of not doing the tests versus choosing to do them. For example, Jenny wrote out several pages of possible options as she planned her pregnancy. She didn't just decide whether or not she was open to doing a certain test. She also looked at the research, and then, once she had enough information, she brought the discussion to her doctor. Having the right education means knowing that you can look up anything you want to know. Rather than asking the doctor what they think you should do, you're instead coming to them to discuss the actual possibilities of doing the test versus not doing it and getting clarification on what you've read. This isn't as hard as you have been led to believe. The medical journals are all out there on the internet, and anyone can read them. All it takes is a willingness to look up and learn new words and understand how research works. That's something that cannot be covered in this book alone. However, if you want a great summary of how research is done and the limitations, I recommend you check out Why Induction Matters by Rachel Reed, as this book has a succinct chapter devoted to understanding research and evidence in maternity care practices. For now, let's focus on the questions you'll need to start asking yourself. So if you are curious though, Why Induction Matters just looks like this. And this is an excellent little book. I love this for understanding the benefits and risks of induction. And she does go deeper into research and why research alone does not help you in determining whether or not you want to have an induction. But you can apply this to any medical procedure or test or intervention. This is basically the framework for that. So now we're going to go into the journal exercises. And as I reminded you before, if you don't take action on this, then all you've got is information, but you're not taking the implementation. And the trick, the key to actually getting what you want out of life and out of your birth experience is to implement what you are learning. Okay? So there is a list of these same questions. You go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras and you can get the whole list. And I really highly recommend that you do these exercises, because when you know where to go with your planning of your education, you can sift through all of the mess and all of the bombardment of information and the overwhelm. You get very clear on what you want by doing this. Otherwise, you're just going to be going in an information loop and you're not going to know what to focus on. And you're going to possibly fall into one of those natural birth traps that leads to the induction, the cesarean, or you otherwise are just paralyzed in fear because you're just in information overload. All right, so let's get started with journal exercises 1.2. Take out your notebook again and look at all of those fears and stories that you wrote down. Now, you've got your list. Ask these questions. Number 1, what is confusing you about the story or information that you're receiving? Number 2, what do you need to know more about or understand in order to better grasp what happened? Number 3, where could you find this information? Number 4, has anyone had a similar experience with a different outcome? And if so, what is it that they did differently? Number 5, what is the intention of the writer or teller in sharing this story or information? Number 6, how does this actually apply to you based on your circumstances and beliefs? Number 7, how many sources lead back to the same information and how different are those sources? If you're just getting information from OBs and you're not looking at anything from midwives or independent childbirth educators or doulas, you're going to get the same information. It's still biased. You need to have wisdom from multiple perspectives and multiple values to be able to clearly see it. All right. So these are just some of the questions you will want to ask as you continue to absorb new information. Remember the golden rule. Stay curious. Never take anything at face value. And as you do your research, continue to question what you are reading. Remember that wisdom comes from multiple perspectives. So just because one medical professional says something doesn't mean that it's 100% truthful. You need to be able and willing to seek out other sources that can back up what is being said or disprove it. The best way to do this is to argue both sides of the same issue. It will minimize bias and allow you to see the whole picture. And then once you do that, you can then bring in your own perspective, thoughts, feelings, and values. Once you have practiced thinking in this new way, you will also find that you don't scare easily anymore. Your doctor could say, your baby is getting too big, we have to induce. And rather than panic, you'll be able to ask for some time to think about it, go do some research, and explore your own feelings and come to the decision that feels best for you. Speaking of what's best for you, it's time to move on to the next pillar, which is about choosing the right environment. Step 3, immerse yourself in the right environment. Where you choose to give birth matters. In fact, it's one of the reasons so many of my clients end up choosing to birth at home, or at least outside of the hospital. I hinted about this earlier that most hospitals are not set up to facilitate a true natural birth. This is because the entire hospital system was developed for efficiency, and birth is not efficient. In Rachel Reed's book, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, she explains how the system actually works, the attitudes of the people working in the hospitals, and what it can be like as a midwife coming in with different values. She also talks about how labor is handled inside the system versus when it is left to unfold in its own time. What you need to know right now is this. You must choose your birth location based on where you feel safest to let your birth unfold on its own. That means that if you decide you feel safer where there is immediate access to medical intervention, then you need to research the hospital and their policies carefully and see whether they even support a mostly hands-off birth experience. Bottom line is this: you cannot birth where you don't feel safe. You also cannot make decisions and get out of fear if you don't feel safe. The right environment cannot exist when you don't feel safe. And that's what this section will help you create. There are actually 3 parts to this. The first is where you'll give birth, but the other 2 are often invisible and overlooked, and they directly influence your birthing space. So what are these other 2 environmental forces? First of all, you need the right environment for learning your options, your rights, and how birth works. Let's go back to the example with your childhood education, where you were taught what to think. With typical childbirth books and classes, that same environment exists. Lessons are structured based on what the educator thinks is most relevant. And if you are learning from a nurse, that training will focus on coping with the pain, the typical labor stages, and interventions you can expect when things go wrong. The entire model might seem normal because that's what has always been taught. But remember what I said about hidden biases and intentions. There's an intention with those classes too. Your friendly labor and delivery nurse teaching you all those breathing techniques is also teaching you something else that you might not be able to see right away. How to be a good, compliant patient. In fact, it's built into the language of, we might allow you, or we recommend, or here's what will happen. There's typically no discussion of whether or not you can decline any of the routine examinations because they don't factor individuality into it at all. I learned this firsthand when I took these classes back when I was a first-time mother. I kept thinking, these classes keep talking about a birth experience I don't even plan on having. I'm the only one here who has a midwife. I'm the only one here who is having a home birth. Most of the other moms in the class wound up having some level of intervention in their births, despite the nurse's warning that showing up at the hospital too early would result in more stuff being done to them. Out of 20 women, I was the only one who beat the system and had a physiological birth. One other mom had a vaginal birth with forceps and an episiotomy. The lesson here is that you need to be careful who you are learning from because they might tell you the wrong things. They might operate on the medical model of birth that leads to high interventions and emergency cesareans. If you're going to choose to read books or take classes, and I do encourage you to do so, then what you need to do is think first about the kind of birth you want to have, and then seek out the information that will help you plan for that experience. Don't just sign up for any random childbirth class that's on offer based on price or recommendations from the mom groups. You need to really do your homework and find out what the classes offer, who the instructor is, their birth philosophy, and the kinds of births experienced by past students. If you're really stuck, you can ask doulas. We often know who is teaching classes, and we like to pass on referrals to the better ones. The next part of getting the right environment is where you go for support outside of friends and family. I'm talking about online and in-person communities, the mom groups. There is so much I could say about these groups, and it's not all kind. Some are just not worth the headache. The reason I say this is because groups of any kind can create a hive mind. And this means that when you ask a question that threatens someone else's birth philosophy or triggers their trauma, they can swarm and tell you how you're wrong. This is especially damaging when this is your first baby and you don't know what to expect, because other people who have been previously traumatized will insist that whatever concern you have isn't valid and that it's normal. A particularly horrifying example of this is when a first-time mom I knew asked in a mom group whether or not she was making a big deal over her doctor shoving his fingers high up into her cervix and hurting her during an exam. She had been checking her own cervix and had mentioned to her doctor that she intended to have a natural birth. This doctor decided to teach her a lesson by deliberately doing a painful exam, and then told her that if she couldn't handle that, then she would be begging for the epidural when labor got going. As terrible as this story is, what happened afterward was far worse. You see, many women poured into the comments to admonish this mother for daring to check her own cervix. You're not a doctor, so you can't possibly know what it was supposed to be like, they told her. Many told her that what happened to her was normal. Others told her that she probably offended the doctor by acting like a know-it-all, and that while he had been aggressive, she really needed to trust his medical experience over Dr. Google. A few women were bold enough to call it what it was: assault. While I was able to calm her down and validate her feelings, the damage had still been done. She could move forward and do what she wanted anyway, but those voices still haunted her, and she spent a lot of time texting me over the next few weeks, questioning whether or not her experiences were normal. I'm going to tell you what I told her. Just because something is normal in a certain group or culture doesn't mean that your feelings don't matter. This is why you need to spend most of your time in communities that reaffirm that your feelings are valid, even if they don't necessarily feel the same way you do about the situation. They need to support your right to believe, feel, and do what you think is best. The reason I created my own Facebook group was because I was tired of the hive mind and wanted my members to have more support. I will never tell my clients or members of my community that their feelings are wrong. I also do not tell them what they should do, only offer the possibilities. I ask a lot of questions too, and that's what your homework is all about. So now we go into journal exercise 1.3. Again, as a reminder, all of the questions are inside my book, Your Empowered Birth. You can get that on Amazon, or if you just want the list of questions for now, go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras and download it. Journal exercise 1.3. Take out your coil notebook again and start thinking about the environment you are learning in, getting support from, and where you plan to birth your baby. If you are choosing a home birth, also consider possible backup hospitals in your area that you might choose to transfer to in the rare event that something doesn't feel right or you simply change your mind. Be as detailed as you feel you need to be and come back to this exercise often. Ask yourself the following. Do you feel that your thoughts, feelings, and values are being respected here? Do you feel seen, heard, and like all your wishes actually matter? Are you being given the resources you need here that will help you achieve what you want in this pregnancy and birth? Can you ask questions without feeling stupid? When you think about your upcoming birth, what conditions need to be in place for you to feel safe and supported in your process? Does this community, birth space, or learning environment help you get more of what you want? Or do you feel that there might be things that will get in the way and cause you to doubt yourself? You will likely come back to these questions as you research childbirth classes, join mom groups, and choose where you plan to birth, particularly if you choose a hospital birth. Once you have determined the best place for you to birth, you're ready for the next steps, hiring people to support you. I also want to remind you at this point that if you go and get the extras that come with this book, there is a guide on how to choose your birth location. I had so much in my original manuscript that I needed to break it up in order to keep this book streamlined and focused on the 5 pillars. But if you do want to know more about how to choose a birth location, just go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras. And that leads to step 4, hire a supportive birth team. Who you hire matters, and I cannot stress this enough. This is particularly important when you are planning your first pregnancy, because the choices you make in this birth can affect your options in the future. Often I see first-time moms making 3 big mistakes. They go with the typical mainstream childbirth classes taught by the local hospital. They hire the first OB that their doctor refers them to, and they don't hire a doula, or else they price shop for the cheapest option. I implore you not to do this. Even though the mom groups all perpetuate this attitude, it will lead to nowhere good and you will regret it. Hiring a care provider, a doula, and a childbirth educator must be a deeply personal decision based on what you want for your birth, though few people realize this. I've written a mini guidebook, How to Hire Your Care Provider, if you want a more in-depth process for choosing the right doctor or midwife who will support the kind of birth you want. But the Cliff Notes version is this. You need to treat every appointment as an interview. When you shift your mindset from thinking that you need to just pick someone and stick with them to recognizing that you're actually hiring a service, not an expert, the odds of the game are suddenly in your favor. The power dynamic shifts from, am I allowed, to, are you going to support me, or do I need to keep looking? So before you go out and ask your best friend which doctor they used, or ask the mom groups, or go through the long list of doctors in your area, you need to remember why you're hiring them in the first place. After all, you don't need them to birth your baby. It's a physiological process that will happen whether they are there to catch or someone else is. Who you are actually hiring is someone who can offer you the tests you want to have, give you the information you need to make decisions in your care, and who will be able to help you should you decide that you need assistance during your birth. Birth is not a medical event. It doesn't require all the typical routine interventions, exams, and procedures that society has led you to believe are necessary. You don't need anyone to tell you when and how to go to the bathroom, and you don't need anyone to tell you when and how to give birth. It's instinctual. Your body will just do it. Therefore, if your goal is a natural birth, you need to hire someone who trusts your body to do it and will also recognize that their role is to support you in what you want, not push their own agenda or just do things the way they've always done them. This isn't easy to find, but these care providers are out there. What you want to avoid in your search is anyone who can't get past their own ego. It's a lot like going on a date. You wouldn't stay with anyone who immediately dismissed your opinions or acted like they were in charge, right? Don't take that from a care provider either. It doesn't matter that they went to medical school. If they have no compassion and no desire to learn from you on how to support you in what is the most important moment of your life, then I don't care how smart they are or how many births they've attended. Run. Next, your childbirth educator needs to be someone who also sees you as an individual. They need to be open to other ideas and be willing to deviate from the lesson plan to answer your questions. They need to take your questions and concerns seriously. Anyone who is just regurgitating the same rote information that you could find online without putting their own spin on it or explaining why things are the way they are is not someone you want to learn from. You want someone who can provide their perspective, yes, but also be open to other options. Nurses who are teaching hospital birth classes are often instructed on how to teach. They are also gagged when it comes to discussing certain risks or informing you of the loopholes to their local hospital policies. This isn't to say nurses are bad, but often their information is colored by the institution they work for and by their education. An independent childbirth educator is a good option. However, you need to be careful. Some educators are natural birth or bust and won't discuss medical intervention other than to tell you the risks of having them. They could also provide very good information on physiological birth, but not provide any information on how to get that kind of birth inside of the hospital. So what happens if you develop a complication or decide that you feel safer in the hospital? You wind up being left unprepared. When you're looking at birth classes, you need to again look at what you want for your birth and consider any backup plans you have for possible interventions. What education do you really need that you feel a class will give you far better than your own research? Are you looking more for a sense of belonging as you supplement your own learning? Consider why you are taking a class and what you hope to get out of it before you spend money and waste time you don't really have on one that doesn't work for you. Finally, your doula is not just a person, but a special service that needs to be customized to your needs. Too often, I have seen moms randomly hire a doula that was on the list in a directory or suggested in a mom group without having any idea who that person actually is. If you go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras, you'll find a list of questions you can ask before you hire a doula, and I encourage you to think about them carefully. The bottom line is that when you hire your doula, remember that you need to know what you're looking for in the first place. Why are you hiring them? Are you looking for someone to save you from a bad birth? Sorry, but a doula can't actually do that. No one can. You're the only one who can save you because you're the only one who can birth this baby. What a doula can do is help you stay in your power and remind you of what you want for your birth. A good doula not only will know your birth plans inside and out, but they also believe in your ability to get that birth experience, and they will do everything they can to make sure other people follow your wishes. That means that if a random nurse walks into your room, your doula can head them off before they reach you. Find out what they want and then communicate it to you to either have you agree to have that nurse do what she came there to do or politely tell her to leave. At home, it can mean keeping the pool warm, cleaning up the birth space, helping prepare food for you, and giving your partner a break to sleep or go to the bathroom as needed. The right doula for you is the one who you can trust to put your needs ahead of any agenda. They need to have gotten past their own traumas so that they don't try to interfere with your birth to avoid disaster. The absolute worst doula is the one who only got into birth to prevent what happened to her from happening again. There needs to be space for your birth story to unfold. And now we go into the journal questions. Remember, you can go and get an actual copy of the journal questions by going to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras. Journal exercise 1.4. As you can see, there's a lot to consider before you hire birth professionals to support you. So now it's time to take out that notebook again and ask these questions. Number 1, what do you need to feel supported in your birth? Number 2, what qualities do you need in the person or people you choose to hire? Number 3, what feeling do you want to get from them that will help you know that they're the right person? Number 4, what else do you need to know about them to feel comfortable inviting them into your birth space or to discuss intimate details of your pregnancy and birth? And number 5, what do you want to hear from them when you feel nervous, scared, unsure of your options or your ability to birth? By now, you should have a clear picture of the kind of birth you want and how you want to feel before, during, and afterward. You now have an idea what information you need to obtain about birth, where you'll feel safest to birth, and who you want to hire. Now comes the tricky part, getting your family, friends, and partner on board. Step 5, surround yourself with the right support. Picture for a moment that you have decided to radically change your diet. You have done a lot of research, you hired a nutritionist, and you might even have a health coach. Now imagine the reactions of your friends and loved ones when you announce that you are no longer going to be eating the way they do. Your partner will be the one most affected because in order for you to maintain your diet, you can't be tempted by the foods that you know aren't good for you. Your family and friends might be less affected directly unless they live with you, but they might also have a lot of discomfort. First of all, this new way of eating makes it really hard for them to figure out what to serve for dinner parties. Second of all, they feel judged for not also eating the way you are now. Regardless of these concerns and feelings, ask yourself this. Given what you already know about who your partner, friends, and family are, what would their reactions and behaviors be if you did go on this new diet? Would they take the time to learn how they can support you better? Or would they try to talk you out of it? If you shared information with them about the evidence for the choice you're making, would they read it or dismiss it and insist you go talk to a real expert? If you asked your partner not to bring certain foods home, would they listen or would you find those things stashed in the cupboards? If your family members or friends invited you to dinner, could you count on them to also provide meals that you could actually eat, or would they shrug off your concerns and tell you that it won't actually hurt to break your diet just this once? The reason I'm asking you this is because who you surround yourself with during your pregnancy and even as you raise your children can either support what you are already doing or undermine your efforts. Take another example. You have decided you want to breastfeed, but no one in your family has done it. Eventually, your baby hits a growth spurt and is nursing around the clock. There's no schedule and you are so tired. How will your family support your efforts to breastfeed and get the rest you need? I'm sorry to tell you, but most of the time what happens is that people will tell you to just give a bottle. I had a lot of well-meaning relatives and even a few friends tell me to keep a can of formula on hand just in case I couldn't breastfeed. I see the same advice being given to first-time moms who express intentions to breastfeed in the mom groups. This advice is not helpful. It's given to basically say, oh, it's okay if you fail at what you want, and it's too hard anyway. So you might as well plan your exit strategy now because you will definitely need it when things don't work out. As a first-time mom, you're going to have enough people out there telling you what you can and can't do. You'll constantly have your confidences undermined. People love to click their tongues and wag their fingers and warn you that your expectations are too high and too unrealistic. Many tried and failed because they didn't know what they didn't know, and they simply listened to the same bad advice and got the same bad information. When you've been there and gotten out of your own trauma enough to see what happened clearly, it's easier to map out the paths and traps to avoid. But when you're doing it for the first time, you often don't realize that what other people say you can't do comes from their beliefs, not yours. The truth is, you won't know what you're capable of if you never try. If you give up before you even start, you won't see how far you can get. Birth and parenting is not a one-size-fits-all experience. Even if you do it a second, third, or fourth time, you'll learn something new each time you do it. This is why it is crucial that you choose your people wisely. If your partner is scared, they need to get past that. If your partner is unsure, they need to learn to trust that you know what you need. If your family is trying to convince you that the kind of birth you want isn't possible, you need to find a way to block those messages. Learn how to set a boundary with them now, and when your baby is 6 months old and exclusively breastfeeding, then Aunt Karen won't be slipping them bottles and mashed baby foods the moment your back is turned. Recognize that even though you have never done this before, you are 100% equipped to grow, birth, and raise this baby your way. You define what that looks like. You get to decide whether you introduce bottles, whether you sleep train, whether you do timeouts, whether your kid gets lots of screens or no screens, and basically everything that you will ever need to make a decision on for the next 18 years. What does the right support look like? That's up to you. Some people find it helpful to hear the concerns of their family and friends, and others would rather everyone just shut up and trust that they know what they're doing. Even the words you want to hear might be unique. Take, for example, "You've got this." For some moms, this can reaffirm that they have everything they need, but others find it dismissive to their fears and concerns. The key is in knowing how certain phrases affect you, so that you can communicate it to the people closest to you and give them the right expressions that will have you feeling safe, heard, and validated in your feelings. Ultimately, your goal with the right support is to feel that other people have your back and can hold space for you to explore your feelings, not push their own agenda on you. And that leads to journal exercise 1.5. Again, go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras and you'll get the full list. Now it's time to pull out your journal again. Think about the kind of pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and parenting experience you want to have. And ask yourself, number 1, how do you want to feel when talking to your loved ones about your birth plans? Number 2, what would you like to hear them say to you? Number 3, what would you like them to do for you if you feel you need help or support? Number 4, what words and phrases do you absolutely not want to hear? Number 5, what would you like to hear instead? Number 6, who in your circle of family and friends is the most supportive? Number 7, who is someone you might want to limit time with due to their negativity? Number 8, how can you communicate to your partner what you need from them? And number 9, if you had the ultimate level of support from your partner, what would that look like? What would they say and do for you And how would you feel? Congratulations. You've just done the hard work of figuring out exactly what you most need for your empowered birth. Notice how none of it focused on actual details of the kind of birth you were planning, but instead on how you want to feel and be supported. This is because your birth plan is far too unique and the possibilities are endless. There are no limits to what you can have in your birth. And as a first-time mom, you might not know where to start. This is why I encourage you to take advantage of the resources listed at the back of this book, as it will help you see what's possible and give you some ideas on what you might like in your birth experience. I also encourage you to create your birth plan immediately after you finish this book. Now that you have the 5 pillars of empowered birth, it will be even easier to see the path you want to take. I've created a simple mini course that you can access by going to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras. In the next chapter, we will talk a bit about what happens when you lose your power in your birth or when things don't go to plan. I encourage you to read this chapter, even if this is your first pregnancy, because I cannot guarantee that something won't come up for you. The reality is that you might wind up having a true complication, however rare. And in that case, your plans may need to change. Birth is unpredictable, and the tools in this book can help you avoid most of the common traps that lead to unnecessary intervention. But it can't prevent a complication from happening because sometimes it's just unavoidable. My best friend Jenny knows this all too well, as she had chronic hypertension, high blood pressure, and that had been one of her main concerns as she went through her pregnancy. The first time, she didn't know what to expect, and unfortunately, she made a lot of the same mistakes first-time moms make. She hired the wrong doctor, chose the wrong hospital, and didn't understand the political game in our maternity care system. As a result, she was pressured into induction without any discussion of the risks or alternative methods she could try. She then developed complications in labor due to an allergy to Pitocin and wound up having an emergency cesarean. The second time Jenny got pregnant, she had one thing she didn't the first time: me. This isn't to brag, but it was our friendship that helped her heal, because I was able to draw from my hundreds of hours of learning and listening in the birth community to help her make sense of what happened to her. I was able to show her exactly where she had fallen into a trap or the subtext of what had been happening between her and her midwife and the on-call OB that manipulated and threatened her. This is the kind of insight that comes after hearing story after story of traumatic births and from piecing together the evidence gleaned from books, medical journals, articles, and experiences shared by midwives and doulas. It came from my own birth experience, as well as my deeper understanding of psychology and what I learned about research and critical thinking. It was in combining all of these things that I was able to see the patterns and create the map, and then test it out with my own birth of my second child. When Jenny came to me, the map was completed. The next chapter will give you a deeper insight, and it's especially important if you are planning to become pregnant again in the future. Even if your birth goes well, there might be 1 or 2 things that will stand out for you where you think, that could have gone better. As I said, you'll learn something new each time. So if you're ready, let's see what you can look forward to in the future. And that is where we stop. So again, if you love this and you want more, all you have to do is go and get Your Empowered Birth off of Amazon. Or if you want to go deeper, I do have a course. It's called Your Empowered Birth Workshop. I'll tell you about that later. This goes into the overview of how to get past your fear. It helps you understand about the right education, so you understand what true natural birth looks like versus what it looks like in the medical system. I show you the induction traps and how not to fall into them, as well as help you to understand what you need to do in creating your birth plan. Remember, there is a birth plan mini course that you can go and get at empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras. And then in addition to that, you would also learn about a little bit about the advocacy skills inside of my workshops. I ran this system way back in 2021 with Jenny as the one helping me because she had gone through her first pregnancy. And afterwards, she's like, how do I take your classes? And I didn't have any at the time, but now I do. I have the Empowered Birth method. I have your Empowered Birth workshop. I have your Empowered Birth Academy. I have other courses as well. If you have any questions about that or what's on offer currently, because as I said, like this is going to be out there. I don't know what the future holds. I know that I'm going to have more courses. Some things might be discontinued from when I first ran this program. Reach out to me at hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com. Ask your questions. One of my Empowered Birth ambassadors or myself will help you in figuring out where your next steps are. And make sure you are doing these exercises, because if you're not doing the journal exercises, you're not really thinking in the way that you need to get out of your fear and start planning your true natural birth experience and get that birth you want the first time. And if you're a second time mom, well, stay tuned, because the next video, I'm going to be sharing chapter 7, how to get the birth you want the next time, which is all about healing and recovering from birth trauma or from a disappointing birth experience and planning your birth to reclaim that beautiful birth experience that you deserved, just like I did with my daughter and just like my clients have done, because I tend to work with women who have already had those traumatic experiences. They've already been tricked once or twice, sometimes 3 times, and then they go on and they reclaim their power. So this is very powerful. Thank you so much, though, for watching. If you found value in this, please pay it forward. Like, share, subscribe, pass this on to other moms. Tell them about your empowered birth. Get that information out there. And if you do feel called, please pick up a copy of your Empowered Birth and support the Empowered Birth movement and what we're really trying to create. The proceeds are going towards putting food on the table for my kids, but also in building more projects, more birth houses, more birth locations for moms who want to have that out of hospital experience, but don't want the restrictions that come with being in a birth center. They want to maybe have that freedom and autonomy. So even if they go past 42 weeks, they don't risk out. You can't risk out of a space that you're renting for yourself. And that's where the Birth House Network really comes into play. Again, if you want to know anything about that or help our movement, just reach out to me, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com. One of my Empowered Birth ambassadors or myself will be there to support you. All right. I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much. Bye.